welcome to this screencast where I will be addressing the anatomy of the leaf. Second time around here, so we're going to describe and explain the anatomy of the leaf, focusing on the functions of the different structures of the leaf, so it's more of a functional anatomy, and then how the leaf is adapted for its function. So these adaptations here are anything that an organism has or does to enable it to survive better. So has meaning in terms of like structure, does means in terms of a function, right, or a behavior. Right? So these adaptations, how is the leaf adapted for its functions? Right, so the leaf is broken down into a couple different parts here. We have this part here, which is known as the blade, and then this part down here, which you would probably call the stem, is actually known as the petiole. Right? That part there, the petiole, is again technically part of the leaf, and the leaf then would attach to the stem right here. In the blade of the leaf, you see that in this case it's very broad. In other cases, like a cactus, it's a very thin needle-like shape. So when we look at the blade, we can also see then the veins here in the leaf, and the veins are what's known as vascular tissue. And they are vascular because they contain cells, specialized cells adapted for transporting water called xylem. And they also contain cells that are adapted for transporting organics that are made during photosynthesis. Read sugars. Those cells are called phloem cells, and we'll look at those in more detail later in another screencast. So the leaf has this broad surface here, and it has these vascular components. All the xylem and phloem will converge here, and then in the petiole be attached then to the stem. So this is how water is getting to the leaf and how organics are getting away from the leaf. If we take a cross section through that leaf, so here we have a cartoon of the blade, and we took a little chunk out of the blade, and we are magnifying that here in a cartoon version. We see that there are definitely distinct layers or sections to this, and again, this is microscopic, and we have slides available for you to take a look at and examine these under the microscope. Let's start on the right here, and we'll notice that there's this layer of cells that is known as the upper epidermis, and this is dermal tissue. So the upper epidermis here is in blue, so this is known as dermal tissue. And then there's also a lower epidermis, and these are sort of protecting the upper and lower surfaces of the leaf. Also, external to the upper and lower epidermis, there is a cuticle, and so you have one on the top side and on the bottom side. And this cuticle is a waxy substance, a lipid substance that helps prevent any sort of water loss or drying out, which is also known as desiccation. So the waxy cuticle prevents desiccation, prevents any sort of water loss. Just below the upper epidermis, you're going to have this palisades parenchyma level here, and parenchyma is just a type of cell that's in plants. You also have collenchyma cells, and then there are sclerenchyma cells, but that's a little more detail than what we need. But these palisade parenchyma cells are right underneath the upper epidermis, and they are the cells that have highly concentrated concentrations of chloroplasts. And the structure of this palisade layer is indicative of its function because you have lots of cells that are very close to the upper surface of the leaf, and those cells are packed tightly together. These palisade cells are long and columnar. They're packed tightly together. They are full of chloroplasts, which are then able to absorb photons of light that are coming down. Just below the palisades parenchyma, you have the spongy parenchyma layer here. And this spongy parenchyma is spongy because there are air spaces right here. There's a little gap, right, between those cells that is not present in the Palisades parenchyma cells. So this spongy parenchyma and this Palisades parenchyma also make up what is known as the mesophyll or mesophyll, either one. I've heard it pronounced both ways. So mesophyll, literally the middle of the leaf, sorry, P-H-Y-L-L. So mesophyll, the middle part of the leaf. Moving to the lower epidermis here, then there are some adaptations in the lower epidermis. If we look over here on the left side, we see that there are these guard cells, and so we see guard cells here, we see some guard cells here, and we also see some guard cells on the upper epidermis right here, but they are generally most highly concentrated on the lower surface of the leaf. These guard cells, which I'll show you in another slide here, are not protecting, but are guarding the opening between them. So they are separate, and the opening is known as the stoma, right? Plural stomates, but also sometimes plural stomata, depending on who you're talking to. So the stomata is not actually a structure. The stoma is not actually a structure. The stomata are gaps, right, or holes or pores in the underside of the leaf. And these gaps, these pores, are between the two guard cells, flanking them on either side. More on those in just a minute. Before we leave the mesophyll behind, we also want to notice that in the veins of the leaf, right, so here is a vein, and that vein has cells around the outside edge, and those cells not labeled here are sometimes known as the bundle sheath cells. Right? A sheath is a protective covering, so this is around a bundle of vascular tissue, the xylem and the phloem. So if we come over to the left here, you have xylem and you have phloem in here. And again, the xylem are conducting water, and the phloem is conducting the organics, right, or the products of photosynthesis. So this is what's known as a vascular bundle, xylem and phloem, and it's protected by the bundle sheath cells that go around that. Okay. So there is a cross-section through the leaf. If you look at it under the microscope, some plants known as monocots here have their vascular bundles in parallel. So we see here that this would be a xylem cell and a xylem cell because the xylem are much wider. And this would be the phloem cell. This would be the vascular bundle, vascular bundle, vascular bundle cell, right? Or sorry, bundle sheath cells around there. This would be your upper epidermis. You can see the waxy cuticle right here. Here's a lower epidermal cell here. There's the waxy cuticle. Here's a guard cell. There's a guard cell. The gap is a stoma. The Palisades parenchyma cells would be in here, right? And then your spongy mesophyll or spongy parenchyma cells would be there. This would be large xylem, and that are moving down the center of the leaf. That's the main vein that would go down the center of the leaf. In a dicot, a little bit different. This one looks more like the cartoon a little bit here, so we can identify the waxy cuticle. Right? Waxy cuticle. This is the upper epidermis. Right? This would be the Palisades parenchyma. Here would be the spongy parenchyma. And difficult to see, but here's a guard cell, there's a guard cell. So these are guard cells. The gap between them is the stoma. Right? Vascular bundle down the center here. You're going to have xylem, right? Phloem cells, right? And then vascular bundle cells located roughly in here. Okay. So again, we can look at those. You can look at those in class and do your own sketching. So if we look at these guard cells from underneath the leaf, so now this is a whole mount section. I did not section this. Well, I didn't do it, but this is looking at the leaf from underneath, the underside of the leaf. And so what you notice here, the G are the guard cells, right? And then the S is the stoma. And so this would be the entryway into the leaf here, right? Into the mesophyll of the leaf. Here's another image of the guard cells, and they are two different conformations here. Here is the here's a guard cell here, and here's a guard cell on this side, and then this would be the stoma. So what's moving in or out of the stoma, what's coming out of this would be oxygen as a result of photosynthesis. Right? What's coming out here would be water vapor, right? And then what's going in would be carbon dioxide. So this would be the stoma open. Here the stoma is closed. Right? The guard cells more tightly close together here. And this is the way that the plants are going to regulate, the leaf anyway, regulates oxygen and water loss, right, as well as carbon dioxide getting into the leaf for photosynthesis. You'll notice that these cells here are turgid. These cells here are plasmolyzed. So go ahead and think back to osmosis here and think about which way water would have moved in or out of those cells to get them to become turgid or plasmolyzed. So when water moves into or out of the cells, the guard cells actually change their shape, and that's how the stomata open or close. Okay. So we can ask you about that. So think about the link here to osmosis and why that might be important, and when that might be important, when that might be, why that makes sense that they would be open or closed when they would be. Just another cool scanning electron micrograph of the stomata from underneath and the guard cells. So putting it all back together then again, here is the leaf, which is the organ of the plant of photosynthesis. And if you take a cross section through there, here is again, the waxy cuticle. We have the upper epidermis, the palisades parenchyma, the spongy parenchyma being the mesophyll. Then here's a vein with the bundle sheath cells around it. We take one of those spongy parenchyma cells there, and we see that there are chloroplasts in there. So we pull out a chloroplast down here, and within the chloroplast, sorry, this is one cell rather. We take the cell here, and then this is one chloroplast. And there's the chloroplast, and here is the outer membrane, the inner membrane very closely together. You have the thylakoid membrane here, thylakoid space. And again, this is where the light reactions of photosynthesis are going to be taking place. So we have these high concentration of these chloroplasts in the palisades cells up here, as well as in the spongy parenchyma cells. On the bottom side of the leaf, you have the guard cells and the stoma, and this is, of course, where CO2 and oxygen gas are being exchanged in and out of that organ for photosynthesis. Right. So you should be able to describe now here the anatomy of the leaf, and not only that, not only the anatomy, but then the functions of those different structures there and how a leaf is adapted for its functions of photosynthesis. If you have any questions, bring them to class. Thanks.